it's news to a lot of Americans that we once felt this sense of rivalry, inferiority, even competition, even fear with England. But that's a theme that, as you go back in history, it comes more to the fore. We have nativism in our politics, and when I say the word, the first thing that pops into your head is, it's sort of racist. You don't like immigrants. You particularly don't like brown immigrants or black immigrants. When a certain recent president talks about it, he means, he says things like, why don't we get more Norwegians or English people here? Well, nativism in the 19th century had just as much of a problem with English immigrants as any other kind of immigrants.
Oh, okay.
They took it seriously. Yeah, when the nativist movement in the mid-19th century, which actually fed the rise of baseball, and we could talk about that, because it was American, right? One of the questions I answer in the book is, well, why don't we play cricket?
Yeah.
Almost everybody else does who was a former British colony. But we're different because we insist on our differentness. And we always insisted that we were something different, that American democracy was an un-English thing. It was a product of our own values and genius. And for reasons like that, when you understand the culture of the 1840s that baseball came out of, you begin to realize that even though all the early baseball players played cricket, that wasn't going to be our national sport.
Okay. We
were never going to play a foreign sport. And, this is a long, complicated topic that I deal with in my book, but it's a good example of, so basically the theme of my book is, and I look at baseball, how it happened from the beginning, which is in the 1830s and 40s, got rolling in the mid-1850s, and by 1870, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. It got started in the New York City area, and in a very short period, takes over the whole country. It's sort of an idea that we need a national sport, and this is it. And it was a movement, really. And you'll never get any of this in baseball history books because they don't look outside the game for what's going on in society as a whole. And this is what the theme of my book is, that I'm finding better answers outside the world of sports than the ones inside. Mm-hmm. How do most baseball historians answer the question when you find out that all the early baseball players in New York City and Brooklyn, for instance, played cricket also? Mm-hmm. Why did they pick baseball? Why did they pick this underdeveloped kids game that they had to perfect themselves instead of a mature sport that already existed? That's the answer to that is outside the game. And if you don't look outside the game, you're going to come up with an answer which most history books do, which is somehow baseball suits Americans better because of our temperament or something.
Okay. Jeez.
I mean, that's ridiculous because we know they played it. Right? I mean, I could give you dozens of names that wouldn't mean anything to you that are important early baseball players that were totally proficient at cricket and belonged to cricket clubs, and they played cricket, had a good time. And then so you realize it's when the time comes that we decide, and there was a time, we decide we need a national sport. The topic doesn't even occur to a modern fan because we take it for granted that there is such a thing. Mm-hmm. Right? We have arguments over what is the national sport. Is it still baseball? Is it football? Is it something else? But the whole idea, until the mid-1850s, you can't even find anyone talking or thinking about the idea of a national sport. It literally doesn't exist. Huh. In fact, adults, this is another part of my story, adults don't play sports in America. Yeah. Except in a very small pockets. For two reasons. One, they don't have any leisure time. Most Americans, if you're in the country, you're working all day long, at least 6 days a week. Mm-hmm. If you're a laborer or a recent immigrant in the city, ditto. Rich, old money kind of people in the cities of New York, Boston, and Philadelphia were not interested in team sports. They did things like yachting.
Sure.
Shooting. So, the sort of whole middle of my book is about who were these people that show up in cities because of economic and social change that are, I call them an emerging urban bourgeoisie. I didn't coin that phrase, but they're these people that are very familiar to us, but they're new in the 1840s and 50s. They're well-off people who aren't old money rich, and they're not working class. There's something new, and they're in fact the beginning of the modern American middle class.
Right.
They're very They're very like us if you and I are in that group. So they're kind of sophisticated economically. They're versatile. They'll invest in things. They'll start companies. They have a little money and a little bit of leisure. And they also feel this sense of participation with our young country and making something out of it. You see that as a theme. And this is why, sometimes people, their eyes get wide when I tell them, they say, well, why? Why do we need a national sport?
Sure.
Why do we suddenly decide we needed one? Well, it's because it started in New York, because this was the bat and ball game that was native to Lower Manhattan. That's the only reason. It's the power of New York, plus the fact that there were kids' bat and ball games all over the United States that were different.
Mm-hmm.
There was the one in Philadelphia, it's completely different. There was one in Boston that was different. There were versions all over the country. If you got in the time machine and went to 1830, we'd see kids hitting a ball with a bat by different rules.
Yeah.
But what we call baseball comes entirely out of the New York version, which was played in Lower Manhattan. Okay, so people who were familiar with that game, and now they're adults, and now they're members of this class. And why did they decide we need a national sport? And they have two very serious reasons. So, to understand this, you have to forget everything we think about baseball. Because we think of baseball primarily as an entertainment business. And it's something you watch and you consume.
Yeah.
The people that founded it had it was the furthest thing from their mind that they were creating a business or that even anyone would watch it.
Really?
They were creating something for people to play, yes.
Oh.
So the two serious purposes were, a lot of people thought at the end of the revolution from then for the next 50 years that our biggest problem as a country was the states were disjointed. They were like separate countries. And some of the people, and they needed to be culturally unified, economically unified in terms of transportation. And a lot of the people were working on all three. That's what's so interesting to me. So some of the people that were pushing baseball were doing things like building railroad lines between New York and Philadelphia.
Huh.
Same people. And the other problem was we had terrible public health. The cities in particular were very unhealthy. And, given what we just lived through, it's a lot easier to understand than it would have been a few years ago, that there were waves of epidemic disease that were killing New Yorkers and Philadelphians and Bostonians. It actually lowered your life expectancy to move to an American city in the 19th century.
Yikes.
Yeah. So we're talking cholera, yellow fever, typhus. And, they didn't understand those diseases because they didn't understand infection until the later part of the century. So in the time when baseball was born, there were public health reformers that wanted to do something about this. There were a lot of young doctors who felt like we can tackle these problems. And the way they went about it, they didn't know what infection was. So they didn't know that it was about bacteria and water, for instance, if you're talking about cholera. But they did know that adults didn't exercise, didn't take good care of themselves, didn't get enough fresh air, didn't get enough sun. And those things actually do help your health. So it's funny, they were pushing a thing that's really not the answer to cholera, but it doesn't hurt to be in better shape.
Sure.
And improve your immune system a little bit. And the same thinking was behind things like building codes and requiring air and sunlight in buildings. So there's the whole chapter in my book about how the public health reform movement and all these doctors were pushing baseball very early on because they saw it as a way to get adults to get out there and exercise. This also sounds nuts to a modern American because we all are. You don't have to convince anybody today that exercise is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But the newspapers in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s are full of arguments that you shouldn't be in the office all day, that you should get out there and run around a little bit, and don't get fat, don't sit all day. That's terrible for you, and it was. So those are the two serious purposes: kind of a patriotic purpose and a public health purpose.
I see.
And you can see why you don't read too much about this in most baseball histories. But if you don't understand that, you don't get why it even happened.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. This is my dog, Murphy, and these are dog treats. Now I'll give Murphy one of these dog treats, and all you have to do is press the like button. Just press that little like button right down there at the bottom of this video, and this sweet, adorable, cute little puppy gets a treat. All thanks to you. Alright, you did it? Okay, I believe you if you said you did it. There you go, Murph. She got that treat because of you. Now, I'll eat one of these treats. And all you have to do is click that subscribe button. Right there, pointing to it. Just click that subscribe button. Subscribe to Curiosityness with me, Travis DeRose. Get lots of good video. And I'll eat this treat. Alright, you did that too? That's not very good. Bro, not very good.